dog recovery or
Yeah.
something else? Yeah.
We've already
So,
copied
yeah,
it.
Dave did that this morning. And we've, friends in the neighborhood have posted everywhere on Facebook and
Because
stuff.
they have to put food and stuff out in places that she might have been,
Oh,
so that she had real food to eat and.
got it.
Yeah,
That's
they
a
were
good
very
thought.
helpful to me.
Yeah.
Well, we're live, so thank you for joining us. Good to see you. And we were just talking about lost dogs, belly lost dogs. Kind of sad. It's very sad, not kind of sad. So we hope that dog returns. So thank you for joining in. Thank you for being here on Mother's Day. We're going to keep this to about 45, 60 minutes. And we have three panelists with us today. We have Shelley, who is a buyer broker on our team. And maybe you can introduce yourself, Shelley.
Yes, hi, I'm Shelley. I've been with Benchmark and with Tom for almost 3 years now, I guess. I live in South Wyndham. I've been in Maine for several years and absolutely love this place and just jumped into real estate because I thought it would be a fun and exciting career, and it certainly has been so far. So that's it. I'm just looking forward to hopefully providing some helpful information to you today.
And we have Ed Goslin of Total Mortgage.
Ed Goslin. I'm a mortgage lender. I work for a local company by the name of Total Mortgage. I've been in the business now for a little over 30 years. Seen lots of cycles, and here today to hopefully give you an idea of what it takes that if you decide you want to buy a house, that how to get it financed.
And as you guys already can tell, if you need to get up and use the restrooms, they're right in the back corner over here on the right. If you need to grab coffee or pastry, that type of thing, feel free. Obviously, these events are brought to you by Benchmark Real Estate, Total Mortgage, but also we have some donated treats and goodies here from the Holy Donut. We're going to have pizza later from Otto's, and we've got some coffee from Coffee by Design and our friends. Whenever possible, obviously, we try to have local vendors, local suppliers here, and we support our local community. So today's topic, and some of you got this in the mail, some of you have seen it on social media, is all about buyers. Now, we're going to have a moment throughout the process to talk to people and answer questions, but we're also going to have time at the end, like we did last week when we talked about sellers, to have a breakout session to discuss your particular situation, your particular questions around this. Now, part of what we're dealing with right now is topics of the day, if you will. Like, what does it mean to be a buyer in today's market? And what I'm talking about is really this matter of being a buyer in a seller's market. It has been a seller's market for, what would you say, Ed? How long?
3+ years.
3+ years, yeah. So guys, this is an unprecedented time that we have been in, and the rules, if you will, of the typical cadence are out the window, right? So normally, and having been in the business myself for nearly 20 years, in the past, depending on the cycle, the pendulum of negotiation strength could swing from a seller, right, in a seller's market, to a buyer in a buyer's market. Now, Ed and I both went through the 2006-07 crash. I never want to see that again. It was a very, very, very tough time. Are there portions of today that are reminiscent of that? I hate to say yes, because I was in it prior to that. I got in the industry, I think, around 2003-ish. So there was a tremendous lead up, a lot of buyer activity, bidding wars and these things. You saw sort of the signs of something sort of destabilizing in the market. And then clearly we had folks who, let's just say the property was listed for $300, they purchased it for $350 in a multiple offer situation. 2 years goes by, they pulled out some equity in that home, now the financial crash happens, right? Or they want to take that job and they happen to say, hey, I want to take this job in California. This is a real story that happened to me. A couple in Gorham bought a beautiful colonial, 3-car garage, gorgeous house. They took out the equity line because the appraiser said they had the equity in the house. They got another 150, bought a car, bought another car, bought a boat, had a good little life going. Well, they wanted to take a job 2 years after they bought that and after they got it in. They were upside down to the tune of $200,000. So it's a very, very tough message to go into somebody who has a loan now of that plus what they took out in equity and say to them, you're going to have to do a short sale on that. So we're not there. We hope there's a soft landing out of this with some of the work that the Fed is doing to address inflation. But we worry a little bit if we project ahead that we may be at a bit of a peak here in this market. Could Portland, big picture wise, be a little insulated from that, or greater Portland? Obviously, the introduction of new inventory is not easy to do here, right? So that we just can't throw up a whole bunch of houses and build a whole bunch of things, right? Because of code and because of just the sheer ability to get things built in a competitive and highly, staggered building environment with contractors. So we have more people that want to move here. We have a limited number of supply, and what we're seeing still, and probably for what my prediction is for the foreseeable future, is many more buyers than there are listings. So when that happens, again, going back to that pendulum of negotiation strength, the strength is with the sellers. I have a product, there are 20 people, 10 people, 15 people, whatever that is, that are interested in that. Suddenly I am a little bit more in control. So what does that mean to you in the topic of today? How do I win as a buyer in a seller's market? Now, what Ed and Shelley are going to talk about a little bit too, some of those questions, we're going to get onto that topic of the day, but we're also going to talk about, hey, why do you need a buyer broker? What is that? What is the role of a buyer broker? Why should you have somebody in your court around that? And on the other side of that, why should we and how should we deal with financing? Should that be something we talk to Ed first and then talk to the buyer broker? Should we talk to the buyer broker first and go back and forth? Another thing I wanted to bring up that, in advance of this conversation was some of the traps and some of the ahas. And a lot of times buyers are not aware of this, and I'm going to share a few of them with you, is the fact that most of us are set up with automatic searches. If we're interested in a type of property in a location, we are often on Zillow or Redfin or Realtor.com, and we say, hey, yes, keep sending me, I'm going to enter my information, keep sending me a text or email related to this particular area, right? What we don't often realize is if we go on and click more information frequently, that's not the listing agent, right? So what these sites do and how they make most of their money is selling opportunities for you to connect with an agent. So that agent may have nothing to do with that listing. They may not know anything about that location or that property. But what the public doesn't understand is that they think usually that they're contacting the listing agent to get more information about the property. And oftentimes, we sell a lot of properties in Portland and Greater Portland. We're there, we're showing the property, and the buyer shows up with this other agent, and the other agent is the buyer is very confused about what's exactly going on there. So buyer beware, right? It's best to identify, whether again through Ed or through a team like ours, a team that's there to help you, that's qualified to help you buy. Start there versus going onto a listing and making that connection that way. So that can be done through research. You can certainly research different firms. But again, I would say anybody listening, obviously we have a dedicated team. And some of the boutique firms versus some of the big box firms, we have our choice of agents, right? We have agents usually with a little bit more experience, a little higher level of licensing, and it goes from a sales agent when you first start out, and this idea you got to make sure that person's mentored, and then it goes to associate broker and then broker. So we have a higher level in our smaller firm of people with advanced not only life experience but real estate experience plus real estate sales experience, right? Those are three sort of different categories. Do you know about homes? Do we know about how to be a professional person? And then do we really know our industry to make sure that we're advising people the right way, whether they're buying or selling? So a couple other little things here is the different types of buyers. Now, we all hear about first-time buyers and there's programs around that. We have buyers who are also the experienced buyer. Sometimes, you know, a buyer, and again, it's a little bit different in this market than it is in some past markets. I'll give you another story. You know, I had a client come to me who worked with me over the course of, you know, the last, 17, 18 years, and he's bought and sold a couple of houses. Now, in the past, in a different market, and Ed can certainly attest to this, is you would have a property, let's say, that was listed for $400,000. The normal way that that would work in a more balanced market between buyers and sellers would be, I'm going to offer $360. It's listed for $400. We're going to meet at maybe $380, and then we're going to do inspections out of that process. So this particular buyer, having had that experience 3 or 4 times, came into my, line of sight here in the last year and a half because we're in this heated seller's market. I said to him, what do you want to do? What do you want to buy? So he's renting downtown. He wants to buy a house, starting a new relationship. And he says, let's go look at the first property. It's listed for $350,000. He says, what do you think we should do? Sale price. I said, in this market, you're going to have to go over. You may have to forego inspections, right? You may have to put not just $10,000 earnest money, but $50,000 earnest money down. He says, Tom, I never pay full asking. Just a principle, I never do. And I'm like, well, that's okay, right? The 7th offer later, he came back to me and said, now really, what should I be doing? He went 105 over asking to get the house. Now, sometimes buyers say, why are they doing that? Why is a seller listing it so much lower? Why don't they just list it close to what it's going to sell for? Well, what I can tell you from working with a lot of sellers is there's no justification for it. Guys, over the last 30, 40 years in this industry, we've looked to comparable sales in the last year to say, okay, something similar in your neighborhood in North Deering sold for $450 3 months ago, and another one down the street sold for $470. The market's a little better, a little worse. Let's list it for $480. That's gone. I don't even look back more than 6 months. I'll set the price really in the last 3 months of what sales comps around there was, and then I'll set it, but then the buyers come in and bid it up. And we've seen houses go for 100 over, 200 over, no inspections. We just had 2 properties that closed, one on Carlisle Road here in Back Cove, 1,200 square foot home. He bought it in 2012 for $320,000. He's a former appraiser. We looked at it, $499, probably going to sell for $525, $550. This is the thought, right? This is an informed seller. Day 2 on the market, somebody comes in with cash. We just closed for $630,000. There's no justification for it. Now, if the other side of the coin of this with sellers is, I'm not going to list that house at $600, right? I'm not going to do that. So again, those buyers need to understand, and that's what they're happening is, once you become a buyer that's seen and maybe missed out on 3 or 4 homes, you start to understand the market much better than the listing agents, and much better a lot of times, obviously, than the sellers, because they're not seeing what those houses are trading for. So knowing it's so competitive, how do I stand out? How do I do that? And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to give you strategies about things that Ed can help with and Shelley can help with, about ways to make sure that your offer stands out in that competitive environment. Finally, we'll talk a little bit at the end, again, answering some of those questions, and then get into, what does it mean to sell and buy? Sometimes people say, hey, I want to do this. I want to right size, whether up or down. But God, I've heard about what I've just been saying, this crazy market we're in. I know I can do well on my sale, but then I've got to jump in over here and be one of 20 people bidding on this thing. And then they freeze. They don't do anything. But there's strategies. And Ed and I have done a tremendous amount of these, and Shelley as well, to help people sort of unfreeze in that situation, to take advantage of the sale, but also be a good buyer on the other side of that. So I'm going to turn it over to Shelley. And then Ed will sort of come after that to talk about some of the tips that we have in general, and then also some of the tips that she has currently for buyers right now.
All right, hi, hello again. So I am a buyer broker on the Landry team at Benchmark Real Estate, and so I work specifically with buyers. And I'm gonna talk here kind of like in three segments, and some of this may be a little redundant, and just to reiterate some of the things that Tom was saying. There are so many buyers out there that really don't understand the importance of having a buyer broker and somebody in your court working on your behalf. They don't understand that it's really necessary. As a buyer broker, we are a trusted guide for you, and we are a very knowledgeable resource from day one through closing and beyond. This is just what we do. We look at houses, we do contractors, we can help in so many different ways and just facilitate the whole home buying process for you. We work on your behalf in your best interest only. We keep your information confidential. We are negotiating your bargaining position. Everything is between the two of us. The other thing is that I think there's a bit of an apprehension for buyers. They don't want to have a broker, an agent, because they like, I think in the back of their head, and I know because I thought the same thing in the past, that's going to cost me money. I'm going to have to pay for an agent. Well, as a buyer, you don't. The commissions come from the seller. When you go to closing, the closing disclosure, you'll see the commissions are taken from the seller. So, and Tom said, why do you want to, Shelley's going to talk about why do you want to work with a buyer broker. For me, the question is why not work with a buyer broker? It's to your advantage, to your benefit only. There's no downside to doing it. So with that in mind, then the goal is I need to find a buyer broker. And the Zillows are great and the Redfins are great, and I've worked with some wonderful buyers from those situations. And Tom's right, they're sort of weird phone calls because you get this call and it's like somebody thinking they're calling the listing broker, but that's not who they're really talking. It's a strange way to start a relationship, but it works perfect, it works great, we love it. But if you're going to look for property in a particular market, I think it's important to reach out and interview different agencies versus just getting being hooked up with a buyer broker that you have no idea if you're going to enjoy working with them or not, or if you can trust them. So talk to agencies. There are lots of agents in town. Benchmark is one of the top, if not the top agency on the peninsula. So our chart, the bench is deep here. We have lots of experience, lots of years, and Tom has been around for a very long time, and just it's a reputable reputation. But you need to find out your broker. This is a person you're going to be working with a lot, and you need to make sure that they're going to be available to you when you need them. Make sure they're going to be flexible. My phone is in my pocket every second of the day, and I'll get a text, an email, a phone call, I answer. There are some agents out there that turn it off at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We're not all the same, and so that's important. So, and the other thing too is means of communication. Do you like to text? Some agents don't text. Do you prefer email? That's something else that you need to understand from at the beginning of your relationship. What's the broker's motivation for doing this line of work? Some people, this is a total numbers game, and all they're doing is just trying to, for sales, for production numbers, being the top agent. And there are others who just truly, truly love this line of work, and those numbers fall into place. So if you're doing your job and working with brokers and with buyers and just helping them through the process, naturally the numbers fall into place. So there's the motivation side of it. And then, do you want an agent who has team support? The Landry team, for example, we've got a couple of buyer brokers, we've got admin staff, we've got office staff, we've got Tom as our senior leader here. So we have a whole team of support, so if one of us is not available, there's someone else there to pick up the ball and help out. So once you decided on your buyer broker, then it's important to enter into an agreement. We have something called an exclusive buyer representation agreement. So that basically says broker and buyer, you create a relationship, it's an agreement, it's a contract, you're a team. You're working together exclusively from there on out through your property search. And then almost and simultaneously with that, if a buyer has not already started the financial process and thinking about how they're gonna pay for this house, it's time to figure that out. Are you gonna do it with cash? And if you're gonna do cash, then figure out how to get that lined up. Don't wait until the day, you're not gonna be able to wait until the day before closing to get your funds and have those available. Sometimes if you're selling off stocks or whatever, it's gonna take some time to make those things happen. Are you gonna get a mortgage? It's time to find a mortgage broker. And we have mortgage brokers. Ed is the broker that I work with quite frequently. Get lined up and get that process going, because you're not gonna be able to submit an offer without minimum a pre-qualification letter, but more importantly, in this market, it needs to be a pre-approval letter. And so that means you've taken the lending process a step further and you've actually applied for a mortgage. And then we set up your search. So we need to sit down, figure out where it is you want to go, what are your needs, what are your wants, what are the things you're willing to compromise on, what are the things that you are absolutely not willing to compromise on, and then we set up a search for you, and you start getting notifications daily on what's available in the market. At any time, personally as a buyer broker, I'm working with my buyers, checking in all the time. Do you want to change anything about it? Anything you want to add? And please, the other thing I want to make sure my buyers know is that a picture is worth 1,000 words, yes, but sometimes pictures are not very accurate. So don't hesitate. If there's one thing about a property that looks interesting to you, let's take a look. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't cost anybody. All it costs is time on both of our ends. So you've got to look. You cannot replace walking through a door and smelling and seeing and touching and feeling an environment in that house. And I think it is within the first 8 seconds, you'll know if this is the right house or not. You'll know that. So pictures are great, but personal showings are better. So, and then once it comes time to make an offer, do you want to talk about those now?
We can possibly do that.
So yes, I guess I'll stop there, and then we can go that, because there are a few things that you can do when it comes time to make an offer. We'll sit down and talk about the little perks and extras that you can throw in to make your offer stand out a little bit. So we'll get it and pass it on.
Yeah, I mean, I was just jotting in a whole bunch of things we'll talk about in the latter part of this, but one of the things that I wrote down, and it's a perfect transition to Ed, is this idea of the company you keep. We're not interchangeable. Agents are not interchangeable, agencies are not interchangeable. I think this is one of the fallacies that our industry, particularly the real estate industry, has promulgated. And that somebody with a year's experience can do the same things that somebody with 10 or 20 or 15 years experience or 30 years experience. They are not the same. The work ethic, the professionalism, the life experience, the industry experience are critical. Not just in filling out the forms and those things, it's other stuff. And right now, more than ever, as a buyer, if you want to have your offer sort of stand out, don't think that another agency, say you have a buyer broker like Shelley, that somebody at Cole Banker and Keller Williams and these other agencies aren't going to go, you're dealing with Shelley. You're dealing with somebody from Benchmark. I know them. I know they work with good buyers. And if all things are equal or even close, I'm going to go there. I'm going to give it to that person because I know they're not going to leave my seller, right? They're working for their seller at the altar and not have the closing happen. I know that agency and that person is qualified and they're putting as much trust in the offer and what's written, and the letter from your buyer maybe, and the equal weight is who's representing you as a buyer. And the extension of that is Ed. Who do you have that pre-qualification letter from? One of the most experienced lenders in the state, what I consider the most experienced and the most trusted for me. It packs an additional punch, and it helps you win that sale, that purchase of that dream house that you want. So that's why I'm so excited to have Ed here.
Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, being experienced usually means you're old, so I guess there's good and bad with that.
I'm the senior guy on the team. Did you see
I
that?
didn't mean it. The wisest. No, I don't say that.
But nonetheless, as mentioned before, I work for a company called Total Mortgage. We're a national lender. We're licensed in every state to do mortgages. However, we have a local presence. We have an office right here in Portland over on Forest Avenue, which, again, as Tom mentioned, is very important in this market, that with all of the competition for homes, people really like to know others that are involved in the process and have a level of comfort with them, a level of trust. And so my office is over on Forest Ave. We handle everything from basically the origination process directly through the closing. So everything happens under our little roof. Our company, there's various titles that companies have, brokers, banks. We're considered to be a mortgage lender. What a mortgage lender does is basically a lot of the same thing that banks do, but we usually have more options in terms of places that potentially we can put a loan. My responsibility as a loan officer is basically meet with you, talk with you about what your situation is, listen in terms of what those details might be, and then take it from there in terms of trying to figure out the best place for you in terms of a specific loan. There's lots and lots of different programs. I left some brochures out there from anywhere from Maine Housing Authority, which is a first-time home buyer program. There's, if you're a veteran, there's VA loans. FHA is Federal Housing Authority, great options for multifamilies. Straight conventional financing. So there's a lot of different products and programs, construction loans, land loans. There's a lot of different things that we can do as a mortgage lender. And basically, we're here to listen and review what your situation is, and then figure out how to best be able to put you into whatever your dream might be. As part of that process, there's another form that's up there, and the do's and don'ts of mortgage lending. I won't go through the details. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, if you're thinking about buying something sooner versus later, you want to make sure you're taking care of your credit, paying things on time, don't take out new credit, all of the, sensible things that go along with, potentially looking to buy a house. My responsibility basically is, very first listen to what's going on. There's no fee that you pay me throughout the process of just having a conversation. If you want to be pre-qualified, if you want to be pre-approved, if you want to apply. Basically, there's no obligation on your part until such point in time is, that you submit an application, and it's not a fee to me. It's fees to such people as appraisers and things like that other people that are doing work as part of the process that expect to be paid. So where I normally start in the process is after a conversation. Typically, if this is something that you're planning on doing sooner versus later, review credit with you. At that point in time, based off your credit, I can make recommendations. This is what you need to think about going forward. If, is this something that you're planning in for a month or 6 months or a year or whatever? I've had plenty of people that I've had conversations with and said, this is really where you have to go with this. And then I hear from them in 6 months, a year, 2 years later, hey Ed, remember me? You sat down, you talked with me, I did what you told me to do, and now, I'm seeing online that my credit score is 680 or 700 or whatever, where maybe it was 500 when we started. And so, my role doesn't necessarily start today. It might be in 6 months or a year, but my role is to try to help you get to where you want to be in terms of, the lending process. One of the products that we have, again, that's been very popular in this sort of environment is what we call Greenlight. Greenlight is where you actually make application, provide your pay stubs, your bank statements, any other paperwork that we may need to get you approved, so that when you walk into a home with Shelley, you've already got your loan approval in hand. And again, that might be something that puts you or sets you apart from the other 10 or 15 people that may also want to look at this home and potentially purchase it. So as a seller, those sellers are always going to, if it's a situation where everything else is being equal, but in your particular case, you've already been approved for your financing, then a lot of those steps have already been taken away and your offer looks that much more attractive. Greenlight costs nothing, and again, there's no obligation, and ultimately, the approval is it's in 90-day increments. That's how good the credit reports are good for. And so, every 90 day we may update that information and update your approval, especially if you're out there actively looking at homes. So again, understand that we are here for you to use as a sounding board with any questions, help you through the process, have you have a clear understanding of what that process looks like, and then ultimately, hopefully get you into the home of your dreams.
Thank you, Ed. So maybe we have a little conversation back and forth about what's happening sort of right now, and if there's any questions you guys have based on what we have just spoken about, we're happy to field any of that. Any questions or thoughts based on any of that?
No, I learned a lot. Yeah, I didn't know about the whole getting the pre-approval first and speaking to a broker. So it's good to know, because when I do plan to buy my first home, I know the right steps to take before going through anything.
Yeah, and guys, this stuff, you could have a semester class in college around this topic. I mean, no kidding. It is that rich and deep. So what we're doing is just scratching that surface, and every time we deal with a buyer or a seller or a borrower, we learn and we take that knowledge to the next person, right? So, and then you learn from your own interactions. Shelley is relocated to different places, bought and sold. How do you handle those things? How do I take that learning and then help strategize around making this the best possible thing for that particular client?
And every client is very different.
Yeah.
I mean, every situation, it's a unique story every time, so.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you a call. I talked to them last week and I have your card and I'm giving you a call. I'm selling and buying, so.
Perfect.
I'm in one of those situations that they told me I can't even get pre-approval without selling my house first, even though I live in that neighborhood that that house sold for $200,000 over, and my house is bigger, and I have more land. So, yeah, I'm in a situation that I'd like to downsize, and they're telling me basically you can't do that, which logically makes no sense to me. But I understand it, because I was also in that market trying to sell in 2007, and took a while for my old house to sell, and I had 2 mortgages, so don't want to do that again either. But, yeah, so.
Well, it is this, in order to buy, then how do I do that? How do I get that first down there? And then how do I become that attractive buyer on that other side, right? So we do have, many people in that situation, that again, maybe you want to, get into a different house. Maybe it's time for me to go into a condo. Maybe it's something where I need a bigger house because the family's expanding. And the strategies, again, are important. And then reaching out to a team that's helped other people do that. I'll give you a couple of examples right now that, I thought was very clever. Had a seller come to me. We were talking last fall and trying to strategize. She's in a big house, the family's grown. And she doesn't need that house anymore. But, you know, she doesn't particularly want to go out and buy something else. Could she? I guess she could. She doesn't particularly want to tap into all the equity of that house. So the strategy came down to, let's find you, say, January, February, a nice rental. She was able to take her time, stay in her own house, find that next rental, move into it, not live in it per se, because she's still living in her house, right? And then she's downsizing that house, getting it all ready, moving some stuff to storage, and she's going to hit the market here in a few weeks. But it's been a 3 or 4 month planning process. Plan ahead, plan for success, so that she's got her rental done. So there's not this, I'm listing my house, now I've got to find a rental because they want me out in 3 weeks. This is stress, we don't need that, right? So yes, she had to pay on that rental for 2 or 3 months prior to really needing it. But that's a lot easier to figure that out. Now, what does that do for her on the other side? She's, you know, again, she doesn't have to panic about getting into a rental she doesn't really want because she only has a limited time. She also then has the cash for her sale. She's got a lot of equity in that house. She becomes the cash buyer. She can close whenever that other party wants to close, that seller. If that other party, that seller wants to rent back, well, she get a year lease. She's totally fine. So she can do it. And if the house needs work, well, she doesn't have to move into it while the work is happening. So I thought it was clever. It's set up really, really well. And then if you think about our market right now, I think there's also a bit of an element of like logic with that, because let's get on before July, right? July 4th usually starts to slow for a couple months in the summer. So she's going to sell prior to that, and then she's going to have and be in a buyer position to capitalize on maybe a little bit of a softer market heading into the summer or the fall or the winter, and not have to just take anything and everything it gets. So I thought it was interesting. You guys see any other examples like that?
Sure, I mean, always. I mean, you know, it could be, you know, a lot of various ways to approach it. A lot of people these days, you know, if you necessarily don't need to sell your home to qualify to buy another one, but you've got a lot of equity in your house, we have a lot of people that are doing home equity loans on their home to be able to access that equity, to be able to utilize it before selling, to buy that next property, and then ultimately, you know, have the flexibility of being able to transition into that new home, knowing that the day likely that they put the house on the market, it's going to sell. And so, you know, so there's various ways of being able to transition, like Tom said, plenty of other options and opportunities also to do this. So it is, you know, in this sort of market, definitely you've got to kind of think everything out through and be prepared, and that's why we're here.
So what are you seeing for like strategies around an offer that people are doing now that are getting their offer to win?
You know, it's an offer in these times, it's a package. As I look at it as a package, it's not a $1 amount. I'm offering you $500K for your house. It's a whole group of things. And the first thing I tell buyers is that if you're going to submit an offer, you've got the old adage, you've got one chance to make a first impression. That's how your offer is. So think of it that way. You go in with your highest and best from the beginning, because that's it. You've got one shot, and especially if you're, you know, the last few offers I've done clients, these have been 20 offer situations, 25 offer situations. When you're, just think about that, your offer sitting on a table with 25 other offers there, it's like, you've got to make it stand out somehow. They're not going to pick an offer and come back and say, all right, we're going to, you know, let's work on this number a little bit. They're just going to pick one, whatever looks most attractive. Highest and best. An offer price, your highest and best earnest money deposit you can put down. That shows your sincerity. It shows how much you really want this property. Your highest and best down payment that you can do. Again, that shows that you're really serious about this property. And when I say highest and best, that's all I mean. It's not highest and best. Don't put yourself in an uncomfortable situations. I just always tell folks, your highest is best, and best is what is comfortable for your peace of mind and your pocketbook. don't overstretch yourself. I mean, you just do what you can do, and that the best is all that you can do. Get a loan pre-approval if you can take it, whatever mortgage you're working with. Ed and I have done the green light approvals on some loan offers. It works great. It's awesome because the sellers know that they've already gone through the beginning stages of processing the loan, so there shouldn't be any somewhere down the line they're saying, well, wait a minute, you don't qualify for this loan, you can't do that, and then the contract gets terminated. Try to avoid that from happening. If you're gonna do a cash deal, line up your proof of funds so that when you submit your offer, you can go ahead and send in the proof of funds at that time. You have an option to wait 1, 2, or 3 days, sure. But if you can send it right from the get-go, that again, that helps to move your offer up to the top. Accommodate any selling. I always ask the listing agent, the seller's agent, does your client have any closing date request? Do they want to close in 30 days, want to close in 60 days, they want to close in 2 weeks? Let us try to accommodate that as best that we can. So we will always look at that. There are all sorts of, we are seeing contingencies waived as far as for appraisals and for inspections. And those are 2 things that's a comfort thing with every buyer. Again, you've got to be comfortable with doing that, and your pocketbook has to be comfortable. What that means is if you're going to waive the appraisal contingency in this market, because we've got the offers that are 150 over, 200 over, and there's a loan involved, the appraisal could possibly come back below that offer price, below that contract price. So if you're waiving that appraisal contingency on your offer, you're basically telling the seller, don't worry about that. I got you back. I'm going to bring the cash to closing to pay that difference anyway, or pay part of it. I'm going to pay up to 5 for the shortfall, 10, 20, or I'll pay it in full. So that's how the appraisal contingency is working. And then on the inspections, again, it's another comfort thing. Are you comfortable waiving an inspection from the beginning, which is basically telling the seller, I'm buying your house as is, I'm accepting responsibility for whatever's wrong with it, and I'm not going to come back and try to renegotiate the purchase price with you. If you're working with an experienced buyer broker, someone who's been in a lot of houses, seen renovations, seen construction, and has a good eye for those things, again, that agent can work as a resource for you and can help you look through things and sort of point out things that they may see that a buyer doesn't see. So again, that's another reason to make sure you find a knowledgeable agent. The sellers these days, Tom's talking about the seller, a seller who may not be ready to get out of their house. They want to close, but they're not quite ready to get out. They may need to rent back, and so there's a rent back option. Some buyers are just offering free rent back. It's like, okay, you need to stay in your house an extra 30 days after closing, no problem. We'll let you do it for free. Don't worry about it. Or we can say, we'll just delay the closing and we'll do a later closing. So there are those 2 options. Other thing we've seen, so when you do a property transaction, there's it's the main real estate transfer tax, which is it's taxed on every property transaction. It's $2.22 per $500 of the value, so $444 and change on every 1,000. That is a tax that's normally split between the seller and the buyer 50-50. It shows up on your closing disclosure at the closing table. I've had clients who have offered to pay the seller's portion of it. So then you just tell the seller, we're going to take care of that in full, 100%. The buyer's going to pay for it. I have yet to have any buyer to ask for the seller to help with closing costs. I don't think anybody's doing that these days, and that's one thing I do want to make sure that a lot of buyers don't understand how much closing costs actually cost. But it's very important to get that number from your lender from the beginning so that you understand what that number is going to look like. And the other little perk we'll throw in is like, don't worry, sellers, you don't have to leave your house broom clean, because there is a condition in the purchase and sale agreement that says that the seller is required to leave the house broom clean. and we just say, don't worry about it, we got it. If there's junk you wanna leave, it just depends on the situation. There's some houses where you don't wanna say that, but if you don't mind, just say, don't worry, leave anything that you don't want, leave it, we'll take care of it, we'll clean it up. So, those are.
Yeah, I
most
think you
common
hit on
things.
all of it. I think it's great. You know, what I would say is, you know, it's a lot, right? You just say to yourself, what? You know, but we were not operating in this mode, and Shelley couldn't have rattled that off 3 years ago. We got here because of what Ed said, this idea that it's been such a strong seller's market. Really a trend here, and I think nationally, is that was, you know, Portland, Greater Portland was on the map. It was a desirable place for people to in-migrate to. We would see people come here from away, and maybe it was 10, 20% of the buyer pool. COVID just took that and just accelerated a trend that was probably going to take 20 years and did it in 2 years. So the number of people who came and thought and believe and know that they can work from anywhere, that means they can live anywhere they want. They don't have to live where close to a company they work for, has increased. So therefore you have folks from all around the country who are saying, where do I want to live? And of course, this is a desirable spot. Now, you can't stop that. The genie's out of that. So how do we handle that? You know, we got to build more of those things. But then how do I then, as on our side of things, help locals and people from away win in those situations? And it's also protect themselves. So again, we've developed this over the course of time, and just adding some of what Shelley's saying, you know, when you deal with not only buyers, you know, some agencies, little agents, just work with buyers. We don't. We work with buyers and sellers. So, you know, I'm able to put on another hat because I primarily work with sellers, and to advise my team on things that they should put in their offers. Right? So we're able to bring that really frontline information to help them stand out. Now, what we're doing on the sales side, a lot of times, the sellers, is there's something called delayed acceptance. So we list it on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Monday. Offers are due the next Monday or Tuesday, right? So how do you handle that as a buyer, right? You know, usually you're used to going in on that first day of the listing, and then you're able to make the offer and make it happen. Well, sometimes you can still do that. And that's what we're advising our buyers to do frequently, is to try to get in the first day or two, try to motivate and tempt that seller to come to you and give that offer to you. Now, some sellers and agents will be like, no, they're sticking to that plan of collecting all offers the following Monday. So you don't want to push them. You don't want to make it difficult. Again, what Shelley does is a lot of relationship stuff with those other agents. It's high touch. I'm going to be a great broker to work with. What's motivating your seller? Do they want to rent back? No, beyond the no rent, no security deposit. Trust. You're building this relationship through the documents and the contact with Shelley and the other agent that says, we're going to be easy. We're going to be good buyers. Give us a chance. And again, that may sound totally crazy that we have to pursue a seller and give them all that. But I have literally seen, guys, situations where if you can imagine you've been in a house, think of the typical seller, been in a house for 15 years, they've got a dog, they got kids, they got whatever going on, they got jobs, the house, they've got it all ready. If you can make it easy on them to transition out and maybe give them a couple of months to figure out that next rental or to find that next house, let's just say that's, $3,000 a month there. That could weigh and sway them because of the simplicity of what it does for their life, right? All the chaos that they have going on in their life, more than another $20,000 or $30,000. So it's not just about the purchase price. The other side is the idea of waiving inspections and those things. It's crazy. Get it? Absolutely. Is it advisable? Maybe not to everybody. But if you're one of 25 offers, do you think they're going to give you anything out of the inspection? No. They get 3 people waiting behind you. Right? They're not going to give you anything anyways. Now, you can walk through with a Shelley. You can also walk through with home inspectors during the showings. maybe during that 5 or 7 day period, the first showing is a virtual showing, or with Shelley in person. And then you go back again, and you hire an inspector, not for a real inspection, but sort of a disaster check, right? Now, am I seeing anything that's not going to be above $10,000 or $20,000, right? So other things to add to that is sometimes people will put in offers to do inspections. However, I'm not going to ask for anything unless it's over 10 grand.
Yeah, I've seen that, yeah.
Now, when I work with sellers, I don't like that. I'd rather have no inspections, obviously, right? So, because it's a full out. They may say not over 10, but it is a way for the buyer to have a first position on the property and get out of the deal completely. Whether it's 10 or not 10, that's a squishy sort of thing of whether the price is there. So as a seller, I would rather have it be more certain, right? That it's not, I'm not going to be left there. As a buyer, just keep that in mind. If there's not something there that's catastrophic, and you have a little bit of this fluff of money, like Shelley is saying, don't go to a level of being uncomfortable, then maybe you forego them completely. Because it may make the difference between your offer being accepted and not being accepted. I love the idea of leaving items and not leaving your room clean. Who cares? Call them dump guys. For $300, they'll throw it out.
You're going to
But
clean it anyway.
think of the stress relief, and you're going to clean it. Think of the stress relief that leaves somebody. I got stuff in my basement. I don't have to worry about it. Little things like that can signal again that you're easy to work with. You relieve a massive amount of stress on that seller, and it doesn't cost you a lot, right? It doesn't cost you a lot. So just little ways to make it better. What else you guys got?
Be patient. There's a lot of information here, so you can, you've got an idea of what the process is like. Dip your toe in the water. If it's something that you think that you're going to want to do at some point in time, start the process and get an idea of what all of these things are going to cost you. We're talking money. We're up here talking a lot about money, but basically, a lot of that uncertainty will be taken, out of your mind. The first house or two that you look at, and have a better idea of exactly what the process is. Not from A to Z, from finding a house, making an offer, getting your financing, building inspections and appraisals. They're two totally separate things. A lot of times people think they're the same thing. They're not. Appraisal is what the value is, and inspection is basically, is there something wrong with the house? So there's a lot of different parts to the process, and us sitting up here and talking to you about it, there's a lot of stuff that's going on, but basically if you jump in, you'll get a better idea of what the details are, and by the time it's your turn, maybe you're ready for it and you understand, the complete process.
Yeah, I love that. So start in, I think back to when I first looked at buying a property, many years ago. And, don't sort of self-regulate and say, probably I don't qualify, I'm intimidated by the process. You now have resources, right? You have people who are here and can help you navigate. Sometimes it can be intimidating when you meet with somebody about financial stuff, right? But Ed's a great resource. And the thing I like about his particular experience, but also his company he works for, is you come in and it's not just like a bank. They can place you with different things based on what you make, what your income is, your credit, all these types of things, and what you want to buy, what your goals are. Because sometimes if you go into one institution, and I've had this happen to me, and I've had it happen to me relatively recently, because of a quarter that they have, because of their outlook on the future with interest rates and inflation, they may say, we want to be a little more conservative. And suddenly you think it's you become like self-conscious about it. Maybe I'm just not qualified, maybe I should wait. And then you go to somebody else like an Ed, which has a quiver, a plethora of people that he can place this with, and he starts to go, okay, here's what we can do, right? Here's where I can place that. So it's not about you sometimes, it's about the other side of these equations. So reach out, start the process. You can reach out to Shelley as well. We're here as resources. But again, you're right, Ed, there's a lot of information here. But as soon as you start, then you can start that process. Be flexible, be patient, be persistent, don't give up. And if you're out there looking right now and you're a buyer right now, you gotta think of seasonality too. A lot of people are looking now. A lot of people want that shiny object that's fully done. Can I go against that grain? Can I be that easy buyer to work with? And can I also be the buyer who's maybe okay with something that needs a little bit of that sweat equity, right? So broaden that criteria, don't narrow that criteria, and work with a good team. So that's what we got. Thank you for joining us. We're gonna spend a little time outside here. We'll just chit chat, and I'll shut this damn thing off.
Can you say that?
It's always weird when you get close to them like that to shut them off.
Extreme close up.